Yeah, I mean, I work on records day in, day out for the biggest artists in the world. I've been on about 2,000 records. And when people say, "Oh, who is it?" I can never remember because there's so many of them, but they will now appear on the screen like that. But what's great about the Young Punx is it's my project where no one's my boss. I can do whatever I want to, and sometimes that's something dense or artistic or challenging, a 15-minute long track, something deep on jazz or thread metal. Sometimes it's just a pop track, and it's like no one can tell me it's right or wrong. I'm absolutely in charge on this one project. And I mean, how does this project sit within the framework of other things that you work on or have done over the past 15 years?
Well, as always, I'm still trying to figure out how things all fit together. I think it's a combination of my whole career is not exactly like a very planned and I just say a very structured career. For example, technology also destroyed my work because you made the song "All These Things Are Gone." Well, Flash is one of the things that are gone now. Flash was the software that I used to produce my work with and also to put it online. And I think that a big part of my starting career, it's about like 100 interactive animations that were presented as an interactive self-portrait, is actually not visible anymore. And I can't even play it on my computer anymore because Flash doesn't work anymore. And all the works are done in Flash. So I think that's more, that represents my career as a whole. I think I've done stuff for the Venice Biennale in Italy, and a couple of musea bought my work. So people follow me, and at some point, even the dude from, what was the film again? Jeff Bridges in Help Me. Pop Icon Film.
Yeah.
The dude.
Big Lebowski.
Yeah, the Big Lebowski. Yeah. He mentioned my work, what I did in collaboration with Submarine, an Amsterdam art-based company. I made this project called Hotel, and he wanted to, visit Hotel. So I've got all these angles around the world because of the internet, and that's still sort of going on, but on a completely different level and with new work, because it's now all about, for me, it's now all about Blender, the 3D software, and 3D printing, stuff like that. So,
but I mean, I've always seen you as an artist who lives within and responds to technology. What's interesting is in the work you're doing outside of this at the moment, you're moving that more into the real world, because the CGI can then go into 3D printing that can then go, and you're now using ceramics. So you've sort of punched through the screen where it's still technology based, because you start with 3D things, but then they're turning into real sculpture. So on one, you've sort of escaped from the screen, and then maybe I'm trying to stuff you back into the screen by trying to sort of move forwards with the virtual worlds that are emerging now.
I think that's true, but it has always been this relationship between like virtual and real world, because like you mentioned earlier, the way I constructed my videos, my animations was like I filmed myself doing the action, and I traced this footage and brought it back into the computer to create these sort of hand-drawn animations that look really lifelike. Now it's almost the other way around. I create the lifelike stuff in the computer and take it out and print it and make it, happen in the real world again. Mm-hmm. So, but it still feels like I'm working on the same thing in a way. I'm trying to sort of, I don't know what it is. It's more like I'm trying to broaden the relationship with my computer, I guess. It's more like computer giving, computer getting, and I'm constant in conversation with my computer. But now it gets visualized or it gets into the world like within like very I want to say ordinary, but it's not ordinary. stuff like ceramics, like porcelain. I'm doing working porcelain now, but it's based on computer design stuff that comes out of a printer and then is translated to the ceramics. So that's.
I mean, from the outside, it's very obvious to me that you're an artist who is continuously moving forward. You can see, you know, the thing you're doing one year isn't the same thing you're doing the next year, and yet the artistic intention behind it, the type of things responses you're trying to get from the viewer, remains consistent. And that's the recipe for a long-lasting brand. So if you just keep doing the same thing, people get bored of it. But if you keep changing to do totally different things, you have no identity. And what you have is, as an artist, the auteur mentality, where whatever it is you do, only you could have done it. And you're, as you say, you're approaching your computer from different angles, but what comes out of it would only ever have come from you. And that's why I like working with you. Is, you know, I send a song over and say, you know, can you do me a cover? And I've got in my mind a few ideas of what you might do based on previous things, or what would make sense. And almost without fail, what comes back makes you go, what the fuck? There was no way I was expecting to see what I have just seen. And, you know, isn't that better than just being bored and thinking that's what I expected? You know, that's what you want from art, isn't it?
For me, it's always like the only thing I could do. So I'm always surprised that you think it is a surprise, because for me, it's like, what else can I do? Let me show you something.
It's not an ashtray in the shape of a dildo, is it?
No. It's
safe. That's the kind of thing he turns up with.
Can you see it?
It's a scary strawberry.
It's strawberry, indeed, but it's made from ceramics.
Yeah.
And when it was ready and hanging on my wall, I sort of had to think about clown and skull that we were using for the Young Punx in the early days. Mm-hmm. So I think although it's a very different technique, I think it fits perfectly in the early Young Punx days. Mm-hmm. So for me, that's more like an example of, although all the techniques and all the approach sort of differs, you still get the sort of, well, not the same work, but it still references to all the work I've done before.
I refer you back to what I just said, where you turn up with something and I go, what the fuck? And you go, oh, what else could I have done? Yeah, it was so obvious that the only thing you could have done was make a ceramic strawberry that also looks like a scary clown. It's like,
for me, it is.
Yeah, but only you would have brought that to the table.
Yeah, but you don't see the steps, like, you know. Yeah. I started with just make a strawberry. Why not?
Why not make a strawberry?
And then I made it, and it was like, yeah, it's just a strawberry. Why? And then I found out that I could sort of shape it into a face, and then it started to crack. And then I thought, like, well, let's use the cracks. And then, well, it's a step. If you don't take the steps yourself, the end result might be very much a surprise. But for me, it's more like, if you do all the steps, there's no surprise. More like.
So what over the past few months, suddenly everybody has been coming to me. Han, you said the same thing. Everyone's saying, oh, you should make your stuff into NFTs. You'd be perfect for it.
You're going to be a millionaire.
You're going to be a millionaire. But it's more specific than that. Is the work that we do is the kind of work that people are enjoying in this marketplace. You know, it's a very nice fit for it. And suddenly, like, lots of different people were presenting the idea that we should work with them on doing NFTs, and we've worked with chosen to work with 12 by 12 on this project, really for a couple of reasons. One is the focus on the relationship between musicians and digital artists, which is appropriate to the way we work. Secondly, that it's not a load of cowboys in it for trying to speculate on money. These people who've worked in the creative industries before and creative media, and this is just the next platform that's appropriate for having those discussions in. And then also, this is slightly boldly, perhaps not working on the Ethereum blockchain that everyone else is using exactly, going for a somewhat more environmentally friendly platform with lower energy consumption. There's a lot of backlash about the negative environmental impacts of blockchain at the moment. I'm sure that the solution we're using isn't perfect, but it's certainly better than other options around. And I presume this is going to be an evolving platform where issues are resolved over time. So I don't see it as a reason to boycott it. Just make our best efforts to not destroy the planet with art.
It's bad to drive a Mustang for the environment as well. So.
Yeah, as two former Mustang drivers, who no longer drive the Mustang.
Maybe I have sort of like a starting question to you, Hal. Do you remember the first time we actually met? Was it like, I mean, when we saw each other, was that an online situation? No, I don't think so.
Well, what I can remember is when I first discovered your artwork, which was around the time of the millennium, and you were working in Flash.
Yeah.
And that was now Flash is all gone now, it's moved on. But yeah. I was astounded by what you were doing. For a few reasons. One, people use the word like multimedia artist, but you seem to be genuinely multimedia in that you started with like a real person and then a photograph and then a drawing of the photograph and then a scan into the computer, and then you were animating with, so you've gone through all these levels, and on your later work into 3 dimensions with CGI as well. Yeah. And you were making your own music and doing your own Foley sound effects. And you were treating a web page as a valid place for an art form to live. And I think that was unique at the time, that people would have, oh, art is something you have on the wall. It's not something that exists on, a website can't be art. And you were really challenging that. And that was very exciting to me. And then also I loved your artistic poise in which you were never quite sure if something was joke or whether it was serious, and it could be funny and dark, or it could be meaningless or very deep. You can't really tell which it is, this ambiguity within your work. And I saw a parallel between that and what I was trying to do with my music, where I was sort of, there's a point around pop art where you can't tell if something is trivial or serious, and I like that sort of sweet spot in art. And though you and I, as will be evident on this video recording, are very different personalities who approach things very differently, there was an intersection there which made me think I would love to work with you. Yeah. And I remember mailing you saying, getting such an email saying, can you do something for me? And it was like, well, there's no project and there's no money. Do you remember me emailing? I got in touch with you, didn't I? Yes. Because, well, my first reaction was like, oh, Young Punx, a punk band. I want to do that. I like punk. So, well, but soon I found out it's quite a different kind of music you make. But what I really loved about your work is also this pop quality, the integration of things. I can vividly remember the, which song was it with the opera singer in it? Your Music Is Killing Me. Yes, that one. But other things you were doing as well, the combination of the unexpected combination of musical genres into one thing that really triggered my. I'm not into dance music or anything at all. Actually, it's more, well, punk is more more my kind of music. But there are exceptions, and I think you're a huge exception on that particular one, because you have such a fine nose for. I mean, the collaboration with Gov Guthrie, for example, that's such an interesting mix, I think. Yes. So Govern is one of the world's greatest guitar players ever. If you haven't heard of him, it's simply because he's sort of so high up the music food chain that only sort of top composers and sort of jazz metal enthusiasts know about him. And he hates videos, right? And he hates being seen on video. Yeah, he hides. He tried to film him at one. So we were doing things like making a dance track, but we were making the vocals for the dance track out of sampling the shipping forecast, which is a type of weather forecast in the UK. And then we were adding a shred metal guitar solo over the top. So it's combining things that shouldn't go together, to see what happened. And actually, I suppose part of this discussion, since it's to do with NFTs and so on, I was discussing how your work was coming out of the different technology platform with Flash. Part of our sound came out of this thing that happened with technology just after the millennium, where music programs like Ableton Live suddenly enabled you to move the speed and pitch of music very independently, which meant you could suddenly stick things together that could never have been stuck together before. Now, going back to the birth of the sampler with, you know, sort of early hip hop and so on, people were always layering layers and layers of sounds on top of each other. But this was a new generation where you could get everything wherever it comes from in time and in tune with each other. And that spawned mashup music, where there was a lot of, let's take Nirvana and then have Britney Spears singing over the top of it and so on, which was, you know, a good party trick and quite fun. But what we were doing with the Young Punx at the time we met you was trying to extend that philosophy, where it's not just, you know, a pop song and a rock song stuck together, but the track you're talking about, Your Music Is Killing Me, that you did the video for, it's essentially a rock song, but with dance beats, Hungarian violins, an orchestra, opera, rock, surf. You can stick it all together and see what happens.
Yeah.
And so the project has always been one about combining different musical art forms, but then music is more than just the sounds. It's always everything around it. And I was at a point where I didn't really want to be a pop star. I wasn't trying to be like, hey, look at me, I want to be famous. I wanted a different way to present it. And so what we've been able to do for now, how long is it? Between a bit over 15 years, isn't it? Your world is wherever possible the visual presentation of the music. And so I felt very early in our relationship, we found that it wasn't a good way to work. Normally what would happen is a band would hire a advertising agency or a graphic designer to make videos and make record covers. And they do what the band says and they get paid. Now that wasn't really working for us, in as much as, one, I couldn't really afford what Han's worth. There's the financial side of it. And secondly, I think it's more interesting for you, Han, to have more freedom than you get in that arrangement. So we've got to a point basically where Han could do whatever he wanted, and it didn't really matter whether I liked it or not. And I like most of the work, and I don't like some of the work, but that's part of the deal, is you can do what you want. And I think that's produced many years of much more interesting artistic product, because you're not constrained by whether it's going to play on TV, whether it's going to look cool to kids. You know, you can do what you want to, I guess.
Yeah. Well, our working relation has always been like, you're free to do whatever you want. However,
unless I hate it.
There was always an however. There was always a list of, maybe you should think about this, or this is, I think this is very important. So we had long conversations about what could be in there and what's important for what's relevant for the Young Punx. But also, I think that's related to the NFTs. It's like, we used to talk a lot about how people listen to music, or how people enjoy videos. It used to be MTV, and then YouTube came along, and everything's changed, and it kept on changing. Also with Instagram, where the time span of people watching videos is shorter and shorter. So we experimented with that. We did a couple of very, very short, what was it, like 15-second clips of your music. So, but at the same time, we did a very long one of, how long was all these things are going, like 15?
Yeah, that's a 15-minute long video.
Yeah, so that was always the challenging relationship, I think, on my side in working with you, is that we had these long conversations. Well, I tried to keep them as short as possible, but you're also very, very giving a lot of input and a lot of things to think about, especially on the way we are going to present it. And I think we are dealing with the same conversations again in relation to the NFTs. We both trying to sort of understand what it can mean for both our careers, or the way we show our work to the world. And I think it's a very interesting step, don't you think? Because it seems to be, it's very hard to get it.
There's an interesting crossing point we're at here. At the one point, because this is our first NFT drop, on the one hand, it seems like the destination we've always been heading for. because for 15 years, we've been making integrated digital art, combining animation, 3D art and music. And we've been making it because we like making it. But it's not a thing you can sell. So it is art, but you can't sell that art. So on the one hand, we've reached the destination where we've been making these things for years, and we've been moving closer and closer to the typical NFT form, because you say we used to make full-length videos, and we've been getting them shorter and shorter and shorter as people's attention spans have got shorter through, sort of YouTube to Vine to TikTok. And now we've made all of these amazing bits of digital art, and suddenly people are interested in buying and owning and sharing this kind of content. So that way, it's a destination that we've got to. But from another perspective, it seems very much just like the starting point of something, because I'm not really interested in where the market's at the moment. I mean, okay, people are buying, JPEGs of apes. Great, people always like to collect things and share things and buy things. But I'm interested in 10 years in the future. As we enter, we're talking about the metaverse at the moment, we've talked about VR before, we're going to end up, it is inevitable, living half of our lives within a virtual world that doesn't exist. Now, at that point, it's a fascinating position for architects, fashion designers, artists, because suddenly those disciplines will have all their limits of the physical world taken away from them. You can create clothes that could never be made in the real world. You can create a building that could never be made in the real world. You could swap what building you live in day by day. And I think it's very interesting position for artists to be in, because you start to be able to create an immersive experience where the things that art does to you, I don't know, you teach about art at universities, whatever art does with you, makes you think about the world a different way, makes you feel a different way, can be a totally encapsulating experience. Now, I want to know what a Han Hoogerbrugge, how do you say your name? Hoogerbrugge.
I'm not going to help you. Just
Hoogerbrugge is what we say in England.
Well,
what is a Han Hoogerbrugge experience world, and what's a Young Punx experience world?
Exactly.
Beyond going to a virtual concert, to be like immersed into our brains. Now that is going to be a fascinating place to be. And so this step with the NFT is just like the seeds that can grow into us creating a world that's never existed before. And that's why it's fascinating for me.
Yeah, for me too. And also in relation to and working with you on that, because the past 10 years, the conversations we had are always a bit about money, because we both need to live and everything. So we always talk a bit about money, but that's not the most important thing we're doing, because we were always talking about the relation between my visuals and your music, and also the relation of our work into the world. And this is what we're still doing with, especially now with the NFT, because it's there's a sort of promise there, and it looks nice, but there's also this hype thing about making a lot of money on a couple of apes. So we need to sort of figure out what's our way to deal with the whole technology and with the whole idea of NFT, instead of like let's talk about making a lot of money.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. My Twitter timeline has spent 6 months being everyone getting really excited about NFTs and talking about a lot of this making money kind of stuff, which is this kind of, bro crypto speculation kind of world. And I think we're approaching this with no interest in that at all. It's that we have been making this art for a long time, and suddenly there's a gallery to display it in, and a way that people who want to own it can buy it, which has never been there before. And as an artist, it's always that question: is it, if you make something and no one sees it, was it worth it? I don't know, but people make paintings and sell them, and now there's some parity for the kind of way that we work. There's a marketplace for it. So that's just very fulfilling as an artist to know that the thing you make now has a place it can belong.
Yeah, well, I got a lot of questions. Well, not by Twitter. I don't use Twitter, but it's more like people around me, like this whole NFT thing. That's perfect for you. You can finally make some money on your old work and everything. You should put it online, make an NFT out of it. And I was more like, I'm interested in the whole process. I'm interested what's behind it, how it works. but I don't like this whole, how do you say this, like you put it out there and become a millionaire idea. I think that's too simple. The same sort of expectations were there when I started to work online. You know, that there was this big promise of the internet, and everything that was promised turned out different than how it was promised. And I think that's a good thing and that's a bad thing, but most of all, it's an interesting thing to experience. I'm so happy that I live in the time that I live in, and I think the NFT is the next part that sparks my interest and also the ideas of producing work, because it influences the way you create your work. These platforms or these ideas about, you know, exposing your work, exhibiting your work. So that's, for me, that's a very interesting step. And also, yeah, you mentioned teaching. This is something I try to teach to people as well. Like when you say, if you make a painting and nobody sees it, there's only one person that can enjoy it, and that's you. And it's your decision to figure out if that's enough or not. So it could be one person or 10 or 1,000 or 1,000,000, but there's always this comparison, for example, to Vincent van Gogh, that, you know, he could have been like a multi-millionaire if he lived long enough.
And then I suppose there's this challenge, a difference between people seeing it and experiencing it is different from owning it. And they can almost be in opposition with each other, because if one person owns something, you know, what is that more relevant or less relevant than lots of people being able to see it? But I guess it's just being presented as something very new. But for me, all it is the virtual world slowly catching up with exactly what's always been the case in the real world. You can own the real painting, you can buy a print of it. The real painting has value because of how it looks and because you're collecting something unique, which gives it a lot of value. The print gives the general sense of the artwork, but doesn't have the uniqueness and therefore has a lower price point. This is just a thing it makes no sense. This is just a thing that humans do. It's just a madness we have, but it's not unique to NFTs. It's just humans like to own stuff, collect stuff, show people what they've got. So that's what we do.
But I think NFTs are just a small part of a bigger thing going on. Like, for example, the way that I think in 10 years time, less and less people will own a car, for example. You're just sort of rent it, you know, the way they do with the scooters and everything, or the bikes. It's becoming more and more like with music. You have Spotify. You don't have anything in your house anymore. It's all about sort of like renting, and it's all about ownership. Who owns it? Now you can sell your complete musical library to Spotify for 40 million, whatever it is. So the ownership, but it's still a Neil Young song, but now it's owned by somebody else. Some investing company can buy the stuff, and it becomes all sort of strange the way ownership works. Or having your own car or having your own house. You don't own stuff anymore.
So NFTs are going the opposite direction, though, because this is the first time that people can in some way legally own a digital virtual thing. So it's running the opposite direction from the trend, is it? Yeah,
exactly. So but that becomes all like, every time the big question is ownership in a lot of ways. Like for example, now that Spotify got banned by Neil Young because of what's this guy, the podcast from
that guy,
that guy. So there's this ownership thing again, like or maybe not ownership, but more like a responsibility. Does have Spotify have the responsibility for their the content they're giving. So I think in a lot of ways it's a sort of like an interesting discussion about ownership or responsibility for your work and how to market it. Or
when I first heard about NFTs for musicians, my initial response was I was never going to do it. And the reason was it was sort of presented in this model of make an album and sell it to one guy and one guy owns it. And it was like, well, that's the last thing I want to do. I mean, in marketing terms, there's an interesting angle, which is it's easier sometimes to find your 10 biggest fans in the world and sell them something unique for a high price point than to get that amount of income from large numbers of casual fans. So there's a sort of something special for the people who really care about you side of marketing. But in terms of creating art, I was like, well, why would I want one person to have my record? What I want to do is have lots of people, have my experience everywhere.
Yeah.
But that's more to do with when I was thinking of it just in terms of music. Now, when I look at it in terms of art, when I look at the kind of media that people are buying and selling within the NFT market, it's like, well, we've been making this stuff for 15 years. It's exactly in terms of format, how it works on different size screens, the length of the work, the tone of the work, like how long it takes to take it in as a, some works of art, like bang, it's like that. Others, maybe a novel, you have to sit with it for a year to take it in. The pace of what we've done fits exactly with the kind of things that people are buying and selling in the NFT marketplace. So it seems very much like, it was made for us in that respect.
Yeah, but I don't think it, I think in a way we contributed to the fact that NFTs are here.
Oh yeah, we did it, yeah. Set of drops that we're doing with 12 by 12 is a range called Hollywood Kiss. Now, Han and I have been making music and art together for many years, and Hollywood Kiss is the most recent work we've done. So there's actually quite a large back catalogue of stuff that might be interesting for NFT uses. But Hollywood Kiss is the most recent stuff we've done, and it's also good because it's about to be Valentine's Day at the time we're recording, so it's just a little tie-in. But at this point in our relationship, you'd really moved early in the relationship. You were sort of a very flat look, like comic book characters, and then you've experimented more and more with 3D, and so the Hollywood Kiss, from my perspective, what the song and album is the Hollywood and LA of the imagination. So there's this concept of glamour, but glamour and sleaze and success and striving. That's all this sort of Hollywood of the imagination that exists in all the films and lots of like 80s rock and pop movies. That's what Hollywood Kiss is about for me. But Han's work is never really a direct response to the meaning of the song, is it? I feel that you've got some of this sort of glitz coming through the first works, but how do you respond? If I send you music, you never really just make a video like anyone else. It's a lot more abstract, your approach. But what is it you do?
What is it what I do? Well, you mentioned all these sort of influences, and I listen to the music, and there's obviously a disco vibe in there, and the combination of Hollywood, LA sort of gives a sort of direction, I guess, to what I'm thinking about. And I was experimenting with some sort of thing in Blender, the 3D software I use, and I found out it's quite. I found out the way to make everything into like a disco ball. So this is something I thought I could use in this sense, that because of the words itself, like Hollywood Kiss. You think about there should be a kiss in there, and it should be about Hollywood in a way, and there's a relation to the disco area. But I also wanted to make it a bit challenging, that the kiss is not like the, how do you say, the perfect hetero kiss. So I wanted to give it a little edge to it. So I made the two figures that are on the cover of the album. They seem female, but they're bold, so there's something going on.
It's one of those things, when you look at a work of art and you don't really pass what's happening, you just sort of take it in, and later, it's like, as you say, they're sort of gender neutral characters.
Yeah.
But also around the time you made that work, which is a couple of years ago, it was the time where it was all the sort of Black Lives Matter and so on. Issues coming up, and Joe, my manager, said, well, this is perfect work for the time, because these are two different color people kissing, and it's like, well, I never really even thought about it, but because these things, it is very abstract, and art never has one meaning, but it is a response both to the time that it's made in, your own personal sensibilities, and the themes that you pick out of the music.
Yeah, but for me it was also important. I think I remember the disco area like quite a free area, I guess, like in gay perspective, or black and white people dancing together, and it all seemed at the time okay. We were getting along, and that's something of that sentiment I wanted to put into the work, but also in relation to now, because I think in this case it's like a silver person and a gold person, so you could translate it to any skin color without saying this is a black person and this is an Asian person. It's more like you can interpret it yourself. So for me that was like,
this is the most I've ever heard you interpret anything you've done.
Yeah, I'm just
I mean, because
you know what it is with things like this, it's in an art situation, or you don't really I don't really think about these things in the way I talk about it now. It's more like I look for visuals that sort of represent something, and I'm looking at, like, I would like to have, for example, it's also a technical thing, because the mirror, you know, to make the discoable version, it's not doesn't work really well on people with hair, because then it gets very messy. So I needed to find bald people. And so it starts as a technical thing, but then I look at it again. Then I think it's like, oh, it's really nice. That makes them a little more gender neutral. So it's also the combination of just do something, look at it, respond to it, and then go on. And then it was like, at first they were both gold, and then I thought, like, it would be nice to have these different colors.
One of the revelations of us putting the NFT packs together, though, is the way that people experience art has been degraded by it moving towards being seen through the phone screen. So in terms of musicians, you used to be making records to be played on CD through an amazing amplifier through your hi-fi at home, and now everything's going just onto, you know, the phone speakers. And likewise, you know, you would have started your art career with big canvases and so on, and now we've been making things that, you know, we're doing cover artwork that's going to be seen at 1 inch by 1 inch on a Spotify playlist and so on. And these videos, I've only ever seen them before on a phone, but we've just re-rendered everything in 5K, and that's been the astounding thing to me, is to see these works the size of a full wall TV screen, absolutely crisp and clear, has been, they look so beautiful. And I've never seen the work in that context before, because, well, you know, when we go back to our first videos, they're 720p. They're like this big, and these resolutions didn't even exist, and the computer couldn't handle that size of image. And now these things look like they're real objects. You know, you could feel like you could reach out and touch them, even though they're entirely imaginary. So that's been one of the exciting things about preparing this NFT pack.